All right, here we are again, Coalition Purple. Once
Well, yeah,
again, back on the
yeah.
line. What's going on, man?
I was gonna say, good to see everybody again. And it was funny you were mentioning, our ill preparedness for this week's podcast. And I actually think that it's kind of interesting because, I mean, during this like the holiday phase, between Thanksgiving and New Year's, I think for me personally, and I think for a lot of people, everyone is just sort of like inundated with things that they're not usually doing, and so all the scheduled type stuff that people do sort of falls apart. And I know that, I traveled a little bit for Thanksgiving, with just went up to LA to see my mom and have dinner and that kind of thing. But I mean, it's kind of an interesting phenomenon where everything sort of like has a big hiccup for a few months.
Yeah, yeah, the world still goes on. It's amazing. All the calamities that are happening, and then at the end of the day, it's just like, well, somehow things keep moving on, even with all the chaos going on, whether it's your own personal chaos or just things in general. So, yeah, I know. It's a big, crazy world.
Well, one of the things that I actually wanted to say for this particular episode, because when we first started this, over a year ago, and we talked about, what was sort of the reasons that we were interested in doing a podcast, and we've talked about that, briefly here and there. But one of the things that always comes back to is like a positive type of conversation. We're an example of people who don't necessarily always agree with things, but we're always able to talk to each other. And I know for the holidays, this has already happened to me once at Thanksgiving. You start getting into a conversation with somebody and it takes a turn into some kind of dark place. And, I think it's really important to get your thoughts across to people. Over the years, I've come to, thinking that even more and more, where it's like, if you just sit on your hands or bite your tongue or stick your head in the sand or whatever, I mean, I don't think that's great. I mean, that we have a lot of problems and a lot of things to talk about and a lot of things that are interesting and a lot of reasons that people may agree or disagree. But it all comes back to the idea that if you do disagree with somebody, you don't have to be rude to them. You don't have to attack them. Try and make your point, but try and be kind, try and be civil, try and be understanding of the point they're trying to make. I mean, you may not agree with it in the end, but you can at least listen to it. And I think that when you have that attitude, going through the holidays and, all the confrontations that people talk about having, I think that if you're just considerate of the people around you, which you should always be anyway, and you're willing to have a conversation about something, that, you can avoid many of the pitfalls and problems that come in the holidays, and, really just relax and enjoy yourself, and, have a great set of holidays that, we all should be having.
No, totally agree. It's interesting because I've heard other people talk about this situation, and it seems like it does come down to two different thoughts on that. One is what you described. It's like, hey, we should all be able to talk together, and you wouldn't be getting together if there wasn't some connection, right, to begin with, whether it's family or friends or whatever. And so, can we all just sort of chill out a little bit and listen to each other? Then the other school of thought is, don't even bring stuff up anymore. And
Yeah.
it was like, and I've heard several people say this, when you think about whatever, 25, 30 years ago, politics rarely were talked about when you were sitting around the Thanksgiving table or whatever. It was, even though you knew people around that table probably had different thoughts than you did and vice versa, it just wasn't talked about. So everybody kind of got along. And so those tend to be, it seems like, the two strategies. But yeah, but I tend to agree with you. It's like at some point, we know it's this lingering, burning issue in a way of just feeling comfortable again, just having a conversation and without, going after each other. And I agree. I mean, because I know at least within our immediate family, I mean, we've got, you name it, man, across the entire spectrum of
Yeah.
people. And it's like, there's no way any of us are going to agree on most things, probably. But I think, you can agree to be agreeable in terms of just your demeanor and all that. And man, we certainly need that now. I think people are just also hopefully just getting exhausted.
Yeah, I think
That's
so too.
that's kind of my hope. It's like, okay, I hear where you're at, but just don't be a jerk about it because I'm just tired of feeling this way, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. It's a good time to do that. And, yeah.
But I think that
Oh, sorry.
just
I thought you were going to say
remembering.
something.
Oh no, I was just saying, remember it's really about peace and joy and goodwill and being thankful for things,
Right.
that we do have to be thankful for. And I know personally for me, I tend not to bring up politics, but I don't also shy away from expressing an opinion if I have one. And as I say, you don't need to be confrontational about things. Enjoy the fact that you're going to get to see some people that maybe you don't see all the time, friends, that maybe you only see once a year, and enjoy that time. And if things turn in a way that you weren't expecting, which, as I say, is exactly what happened to me, then make your point politely and firmly, and still try and get on with the rest of your holiday enjoyment. Don't let it be something that troubles you. Because I think that's one thing too, that people get troubled by these things, and they get down, and they things can feel dark or hopeless, or and holiday blues is
Right.
definitely a thing. So it's like, try and be positive about things, try and do something that's good for yourself, that you like mentally, and it's like, try and bring the person that brings the joy and brings the upbeat nature to things. And I think if people can do that, it'll be great.
Well, and it is always interesting to me um, how large some of these issues kind of evolve into people's minds. And not that they're not important, they're all very important issues. But at the end, kind of like we started out, just kind of joking how ill prepared we are because of we're doing other stuff. Well, I mean, really, when you think about it, so many of the political divides that we have, um, at the end of the day, there's nothing you're going to change today on any of these things. Whether your issue is whatever, immigration or gun control or whatever it is, it's like, you know, we're going to go on tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And, things are not really going to change a whole lot. That's not to say you shouldn't try and make it change, but it's like I know I have to take a breath sometimes. It's like, okay, the world is not going to end because I'm so miffed about whatever the topic is I'm hearing somebody talk about on the TV. Probably the best thing to do is don't listen to the news or
Yeah, turn it
watch
off for a
anybody on
while.
TV. Yeah, it's like just take this hiatus. It's kind of like doing the dry January thing, which some friends of mine are trying to convince me I should do dry January, which I don't know if I can do that, but I'll try because I enjoy my beer once a night.
Yeah.
Um, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like, can we have like a dry December when it comes to talking about politics in a way? It's like nothing, the world's going to go on. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I was having a
Anyways,
conversation with somebody about was kind of the idea of like understanding your place and trying to stay in your lane. We do this podcast in part to influence people and to get them thinking about things and to hopefully change their mind about things, and maybe make some change. And I think in some respects everybody's that way, but I think when you get too wrapped up in like the everything that's going on in the world, I mean, you may be a person that can have a huge effect on world uh, events, but most people aren't.
right,
And, if you
right,
understand that, and it's like, look, I want to try and persuade my cousin, that maybe he should think differently about how he votes. Well, I can do that by being polite and kind and talking about things and being friendly. And, if he decides that he wants to talk about some things that are going on in the world, maybe I will try and be as convincing as I can to have him think about, how he goes about things. But the thing is, that's kind of where I am. That's my lane. I'm not going to like walk out my front door and suddenly, change world events. I have some influence,
right, exactly.
and if all of us exert our influence in a positive way, that becomes a great deal of influence. But if you let yourself get overwhelmed with global events, then you're not really being influential anymore anyway. You're just being frustrated, maybe scared, maybe angry. And it's like, take a deep breath and take a step back and say, I can contribute. I have something to say, but I don't need to let myself get overtaken by everything that's going on in the.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is so true. And where I really experience it, and again, it's where people get so wrapped up in some of these issues. Like I've been recently to a couple like town halls and things like that where they're talking about the immigration issues, which I definitely have my opinions about how that's all rolling out. Um, but when the people came up to make comments and stuff, so many of them were just mean spirited on both sides,
Yeah,
regardless of what whatever your belief is. It was just like where and this is where I think the whole social media thing has just done a really horrendous job on us is getting people so wrapped up and not thinking about, hey, what you're saying impacts a human being, whether, and again, both sides. And that's where we just, man, just breathe deep, guys. And you know, you're not because you don't even make your points. You're never going to convince anybody if you go on the attack mode.
yeah. Well,
It's just not. There's nobody ever going to be convinced if you when you start off by attacking them. So it's a good reminder for us all.
I would say just sort of, following up on that comment, just sort of as a general rule, I think once a person gets to be very angry, they're not open to listening anymore because they're just angry. So if you're confrontational in your conversation with people and you're pushing to the point of anger, then essentially you've lost the opportunity to be influential or to really, make your point because now they're just angry at you. You're being obstinate or rude or whatever, and now it's just like, well, I don't want to listen to this, and then people shut you out. So I think there's a lot to be said about, as I say, being the person who brings the calm and tries to be reasonable and tries to understand where the other person is coming from. Because I would say that there are very few debates or political issues where there isn't at least some reasonable points to be made on whatever side of the issue you're on. So I mean, and a lot of times what I hear when I hear people talking is they start talking about something and they end up not talking even about the same issue anymore. One person is making one point and the other person is making another point, and both those points could be valid, but they don't relate them to each other. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, I mean, you're just talking past each other now. So really listening to a person and having a conversation and being polite and considerate, I think actually goes a long way to proving the point, and it also goes a long way to just having a pleasant, holiday season.
Well, and kind of building on that too, I think again on both sides, you also have to be open to realizing not all ideas, great good ideas, come from maybe the side you belong on, kind of thing. And that really kind of came to fruition for me yesterday when I heard this thing. I think it was yesterday, where Michael Dell's donating whatever it is, $6.5 billion to start Trump accounts for to help young people start basically a savings account, kind of like almost like a 401k for kids that you can contribute to, other people can contribute to, but he's going to get it started by basically saying we're going to give, I think, $1,000 for kids that are being born in 2020, starting in 2025 for a few years, and then there's different formulas, but the whole point of it is he's putting forth the fact that he's going to, as 6 billion for him. I hear he's worth 125 billion. Not that
He'll
much
be all right.
money,
He'll be
but
fine.
it's a significant thing, right? And it's very positive. And when
Yeah.
I first heard it, I was almost negative about it because it had to go with the label Trump, savings account, right? And I was like, oh, really? But at the same time, it's like take the win, man. This is actually a good thing. And it's a positive thing. And me having a grandson at this point, it's like, hey, this is a great opportunity to invest in his future tax free and all that kind of stuff. And we all need to get better at saving and all those sorts of things. And it's like, it's one of those things, though, you get so embroiled on the side or a particular person or whatever. And it's like, hey, don't ding the thing just because it's got Trump's name And I know I had to deal with that yesterday. It's like, okay, it is $6 billion. That's probably a good thing. He's not, it doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of strings attached to it. It's like, listen, we're just investing in the future of every kid. It has nothing to do with if you're born in 2025 and the 2026, I think, um, we're going to start an account for you.
Yeah, that's
Take
as
it,
I say,
man.
I love the sound of that because actually, I would say that one of the things that I've always had, and everybody around me has always had an issue with the Republicans. They'll say that they want to cut everything, and then the question always becomes, well, like, what's going to happen to all the people that you cut all this stuff from? And the Republicans never seem to bother to have an answer to that. And I hope over the year that we've been doing this show, I've had some answers for saying, because I want to cut things too, but I try and have some response. But I think one thing that, people have said and I've heard over the years is that philanthropy goes down in relationship to tax rates going up. So the more you're impacted and burdened by taxes, the less likely you are to be inclined to make some sort of philanthropic donation to something because you're tapped out paying all the taxes. So I would say individual philanthropy like this, you know, is would be a way to win a lot of goodwill if you're on the side of limited governance. So if you're Donald Trump, who's very wealthy, and you have some very wealthy allies, and they're all of the mind that we want to start cutting from government because let's face it, government fraud and abuse has been in the news a lot lately, so it's not exactly great. The individual philanthropy that can be brought to bear by some of these ultra rich, ultra politicians could go a long way. And because the other thing you always hear about is end stage capitalism and how all these capitalists just want to hoard all this money and they never do anything with it. Well, I mean, uh, something like this from Dell sort of helps dispel some of that. And if you could get more of it, it would be amazing.
Right. Right. Well, and the reality is it is what it is right now. And it's like, I personally have concerns about so much wealth being concentrated by so few. But at the same time, it's like in most cases, the vast majority of cases, they're doing it all legally. It's not like, you know, and so it's like if we have a problem with that much wealth concentration, we got to hopefully, again, you would hope on both sides, we come to some different kinds of systems where they're motivated either to hand over more through personal philanthropy or motivated to, hey, give a little bit more because we don't want these particular programs to end or get defunded for whatever reason. But again, it's become so much of this division of we can't we can't come to the middle on any of these things, and it's like everything that's rich means equals bad, and everything that's people who need help is bad, and everybody's looking at it, they're both bad things, and it's like, well, I don't think they either one are inherently bad. It's just the way in which we address them, and so like I said, I took it as a very positive thing. I mean, I know Bill Gates has been, he's pretty much put his fortune towards other things. And then Warren Buffett has been doing those kinds of things. But what was interesting about, I think it was Buffett I was reading about recently, because he's basically given away most of his fortune. But at the end of the day, his heirs, I think they're all each still walking away with $1 billion.
Yeah,
So it's
they're
like,
fine.
they'll probably survive.
Yeah, they'll be all right.
They'll probably survive. So,
But yeah, that's what I say.
and you,
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think encouraging an age of philanthropy and giving that, especially around this time of year, maybe that's something to think about. I mean, create economic incentive for people to do something good instead of creating economic incentives for where everyone has to be in fear of the government coming after them and holding back when they could be giving. So, I mean, maybe we're looking at the dawn of a better age. That would sure be nice.
hey, no, exactly, and that, I think we have to look at those opportunities when they come along, and don't be cynical. I certainly was when I first heard it. I was like, sounds a little dubious. But then as I kind of read into it a little bit more, it was like, all right, I'm not a fan of the name, but at the end of the day, this is actually a pretty
Yeah,
good thing.
yeah,
So take it for what it is. And hopefully that it does. It hopefully starts the snowball rolling down the hill.
yeah.
But on other interesting topic, going back to a little bit to our gerrymandering conversations, one of the other things that I found fun, and again, I just kind of chuckle at these things at this point, is that there's rumors out there that, and I mean, fairly substantial rumors, that Daryl Issa, who is House of Representatives here in San Diego County, the only Republican, is looking at moving to Texas to one of the new districts there,
Yeah,
um, because he doesn't think he's going to win in the new district in California.
yeah,
And so it was just like, well, maybe this is, again, all a good thing. Going back to your point, probably the best thing to do is all states just start gerrymandering the heck out of everything. And it just gets to be so ridiculous that it's kind of like, balance of powers kind of thing. Since we probably aren't going to get campaign reform or gerrymandering reform anytime soon. So, but I found that funny because he moved from the 59th district, which is our area here in Vista, several years ago when he lost and moved so he could be in the 58th district. So now it's like, well, now I'm just going to move to Texas. So it's
yeah,
like, okay, go for it.
yeah. Well, the interesting thing that
But that's the solution.
yeah, going back to the census too, because I still think that things are going to get even more traumatic. Is that I think that the census is going to look at redoing the census count and redistributing, sort of, what districts each state gets. I mean, there's been congressional hearings on it, and they're saying that the count was bad. So, I mean, I think there could be a lot of redistricting still to come. So, I mean, who knows where this will, all shake out and end.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess the only real controversy in any of it is the timing of when this all has happened, because usually it's not in between census. And so, and I know there's lots of issues depending on the state, why they're doing it, when they're doing it, and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's like, again, because we've made the system so complicated in terms of how we count people and who we count, and then how we organize them, it's just, well, it's only going to get weirder all the time. I mean, yeah, I've been listening to some of the ways with the, they're kind of talking about the whole health subsidy stuff and how, again, kind of going back to the census and all these things. And every time I listen to some of this budget stuff that goes on, it's just like, how could we make it any more complicated than we've made it when it comes to the tax system? It is like, at some point, when is somebody going to just say, hey, let's just clean the slate and start all over? Because it's like by the time you start figuring all the different loopholes, and again, on both sides of the equation, all the different loopholes and all the different requirements, and it is just, I, I mean, some of the things that they just did. I was listening to a video, I think it was last night, about how the new big beautiful bill impacts Social Security, and they have all these different formulas now about how this all is going to change things. And this guy's going through it, and I'm going, how is anybody ever going to figure this out in terms of what they deserve or don't deserve or whatever? It was so convoluted what they've done, and they just keep putting band-aids over particularly with the healthcare stuff, band-aids over band-aids over band-aids, to the point that this is just ridiculous. None of it makes any sense anymore.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've been waiting around for to see happen, and I don't know if it ever will, but I suspect that it might someday, is that someone's going to come along and file a huge and get a huge class action going based on the equal protection clause of the Constitution and say, how are we all being treated equally, all being treated the same, if this person is paying taxes and this person isn't, and then another person is getting a subsidy, and then another person is escaping through a tax loophole. I mean, the equal protection says that all citizens should be treated the same by the laws. And when
Exactly.
the laws are
Right.
cutting out groups of people and saying, well, this group of people over here gets this, and this group of people over here has to do that, and then there's some other priority over here that has to get addressed. And it's like, well, we're not being treated equally. None of us are. You may be
No,
getting
no,
treated
nobody
better,
is.
right, getting treated worse, but we're certainly not all being treated the same. So if the laws are
No,
supposed to apply,
absolutely.
yeah, equitably, there should be a suit and say, look, we're not being treated equitably. And it would be the entire country as a class action.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thought because, I mean, I think we've really gotten to that point where it's like you can't really make any sense of most of these things. I don't see how people can accurately even even when they want to, and I always try to be as accurate as possible when I'm trying to figure out my taxes and things like that, but it's almost impossible to know, does this count or does this not count? Or I mean, it's, and depending on who you ask, you might get, even in the accounting world, two or three different answers
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
because the way they interpret things.
Yep.
uh,
Yeah.
I don't know, it just, on some of that administrative stuff, it's like, gosh, and maybe a class action suit is the way to go. It's like somehow, some way, you just got to like, okay, we just got to clear out all the brush and start all over. Because people talk about taxes in this simplistic form of percentage, percentage for this income range or whatever. It's like, well, that's just kind of the basic start of it, and then after that, it's just like between
Yeah.
the different loopholes and subsidies and things you qualify or for or don't qualify for, what, it's just like, oh my gosh, it's crazy.
Yep. Yeah. That's one of the reasons I've always been sort of for a flat tax. It's like, well, everybody pays 10%. Okay. Well, then we're all being treated the same. Everybody pays 10%. And, a lot of people don't like that because they're like, oh, well, the rich people can pay more and, some poor person should pay something. But then that poor person should get a subsidy. And then the rich person should have to pay some additional fine or fee because of a business or whatever, blah, blah. I mean, you can create all these hoops to jump through to try and create something that you think is quote unquote fair. But at the end of the day, it's not equal. It's not everybody being treated the same by the same law. It's everybody being carved out into a little group and everybody getting treated differently. And so that has always bugged me, but whether or not that will ever happen, who knows?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the reality is, if you probably, and I'm sure people do it all the time, the math on that kind of stuff, there may be a, say, if you do whatever 10%, there may be a slight increase for people that are at the lower levels in terms of
Yeah.
the actual dollar amounts, but it would probably be huge on the other side, that because there's a lot of corporations that pay zero.
Yeah. Pay
They've
nothing,
got
pay.
such incentives. If you look at the oil industry and places, things like that, they got such incentives that they don't really pay a whole lot. Now, a lot of people do that are rich, but a lot of them don't too, depending on their situation.
Yeah.
So,
I,
at the end of the day, it probably would net out to be a lot more.
yeah. And as I say, just because it's a flat tax, you could set the flat rate at, whatever you wanted it to be. And I mean, so you pick the rate that gets you the revenue that you need. Because that's always the other thing about taxes and stuff too. It should be about revenue. It's like, how much revenue do you actually need? It's like, if you're getting the revenue you need, then that should be the end of it. People use taxes to target groups that they don't like. You're not supposed to do that. I mean, that's one of the whole no taxation without representation things. And I could spend an hour talking about how the tax exempt status on churches goes back to, Henry VIII's war on the Catholics. But, but the idea is you're not supposed to target people with taxes just because you don't like them and
Right.
you think you have some reason that this group should be benefited or some other group should be punished. And, it just drives me nuts. And then I guess the other thing that sort of comes around to the whole treating everybody equally too is, all this fraud stuff that, has been in the news lately. I mean, it's crazy. If the governments that are in charge right now can't, own up to the amount of fraud that's been perpetrated, I mean, that is just a colossal disaster because all the benefits that should have been going to people. I mean, I think the one people don't focus on enough in some of this fraud stuff is a lot of these things was supposed to be feeding underprivileged children. They were stealing money from underprivileged children. I mean, how much more awful can you be? And it's absolutely maddening. So when are if the government can't deliver the benefits that it's promising, then why do we have the benefits? Just to fund the people's fraud and so the fraudsters can give the money back to the politicians? I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah. Well, you can kind of go down the line. I mean, just healthcare in general, and we've talked about this a bunch. We've never done healthcare reform focused on actual care of people. It's been
Right.
about
Only
insurance
coverage.
reform, and I mean I think that's the most colossal fraud there is going on right now. I
Yeah.
mean, just the money that is wasted is
But another
unbelievable.
thing, I was going to say another thing in California that Linda was telling me about a little bit earlier was that apparently there's like $100 million that's just been thrown down a toilet trying to rework the 911 emergency call system in California. So they started out with some sort of plan, spent $100 million on it or something, and then just scrapped it. So it's $100 million that is supposed to be going to improving emergency services for the people of California that's just gone. I mean, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
I know. Yeah, no, that's a big one. Yeah, it's going to be interesting come presidential campaign season
Oh yeah.
for Gavin Newsom because a lot of this is going to catch up to him. And again, uh, you either I mean he's one of those people that people either love him or hate him kind of guy. But there's a lot of those things that man I think are going to really catch up to him here pretty soon
Well, we'll see.
because he's behind a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. Exactly. All right. Well, we better leave it there. We don't want to come off too much as old white guys complaining in their front yard. Get the kids off the front yard.
Yeah, I was gonna say
But
that might be fairly unavoidable at this point.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So, anyways, well, we'll leave it there for now, and we'll catch up with you later.
Yeah, enjoy the holiday season. Talk to you soon. Bye.